This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so let me come back and let's check this out. So we were on the other day, we were looking at the components that get attached to a virtual machine. Like we were looking at what is an ICAT, we were looking at what is an NSG rule, we were looking at what is a public IP address and how do you attach a public IP address and how do you do something called as an RDP inside a Windows virtual machine. And we were talking about stuff like the subnet and all these things out here as such. So any questions there? Any questions still there that I can take? Anyone? Any questions I can take till here?
Yes.
Good, please.
Suresh, do you hear me
Good.
right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So, Suresh, one thing, yesterday when I was working on live environment, so
Hmm.
I have created in the virtual machine a user. If you can
Okay.
go into if you can go into the Azure, can you please?
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Okay. In the virtual machine,
Hmm.
are we into the virtual machine now?
I have not created one, but yes, I have an old one. Tell me. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So after we going into the virtual machine,
Hmm.
in the virtual machine, there are some what we call some usernames were there. Top
Okay.
on that, I have created a user, but I was not able to see the username.
Hmm. When you say
Where
you created a user, how did you create the user?
uh, that's what if you could go into the virtual machine so that I can help, I can understand better way. So because
Well,
I cannot share my laptop. I know I'm not in a laptop, so I'm working on my, I am attending on my mobile,
okay.
and that, if you don't mind.
Not really, Teja. I would park that out right now. If
Okay.
again, if it's a personal question, let me address it personally. Let's see if we get some time today or tomorrow, and I'll schedule some time personally and see what is the issue that you're facing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So let's go back and let's get started out here. So again, today I have the old virtual machine. Let me go ahead create a new resource group and create a new virtual machine out here, and let's see what we can do with the machine out there as such. So let's see. Um, let's say demo RG VM, something like this. I'll just go ahead and say this is East US2. I'll say review and create this out. So I'll just go ahead review and create my resource group. And once I create my resource group, I'll go inside the resource group and start creating a virtual machine out here. So let me scroll down and look at, or let me just search for virtual machines. And let me say create. I'll say Azure virtual machine out here. Scroll down. I'll say this is demo VM RG. Now I'll start giving things like demo VM, East US2 region being availability options. I'll skip this out for right now again. I'll just go ahead take this as a Windows Server 2019 data center. So I'm using a 2019 data center out here. I'll just scroll down. I'll just take the size as D2SV3, which is 2 virtual core CPU and about 8 GB of memory. I'll just go ahead give a test user and I'll just go ahead and say the password for it. So I'm giving the username and the password, and I will now allow the ports called HTTP, HTTPS, and RDP. These two ports are to expose my machine over the internet because I want to create this machine. I want to go ahead, create VM, and use this VM as a web server. This is what I'm going to do today as a web server out here as such. So this is what I would intend to do, to go ahead and let's say create the VM as a web server, which means whatever code that you have here, whatever code your developer places here should be exposed over the internet, which means very simple. If you as a user are coming into your local laptop and are trying to go into the IP address of this particular virtual machine, you should see the website that is coming out. That is what a web server normally does out there. So what I'll do, I'll simply go ahead and I'll allow these ports. I'll say 8443 and RDP. I'll scroll down and I'll say next disks. I'm just going with a premium SSD drive. It's a 128 GB premium SSD drive what Microsoft gives you when you start the machine initially. And after that, I'll just scroll down. I'll say, okay, fine, this drive is good enough. I'll say next networking. And here Microsoft is going to go ahead and create a virtual network along with a subnet for me. I'll take the defaults. I'm not going to change this. I'll just go ahead and take the default out here. And finally, it's going to ask me whether you need a public IP or not. Is it required or not? I'll say yes. Today I'll just go ahead and say, you know what, please go ahead, give me a public IP. So yesterday or day before yesterday, I went ahead and I separately created a public IP and then attached it to the machine. Today, while creating the machine itself, we are going ahead and creating the public IP out here. We are not changing that. So I'll say, okay, fine, this is good enough. I'll just scroll down. I'll say management next, not required monitoring. I'll just disable the monitoring for now. I'll say review and create this out. So now I'm creating a machine inside a virtual network, and all the components are getting created along with the public IP address as well. So I'll just hit the create button, and once the create button is hit, now it's going to go ahead create firstly the virtual network, then the subnet for network isolation. As and when you create these two things, you get your own private space. And after that, I'm going ahead and I'm telling that, you know what, I need a HTTP, a HTTPS, and an RDP rule to be open, which is configured inside something called as a network security group rule. So I'm configuring at a network security group rule out here. Then I have a network interface card, which is being attached to my subnet, and it's drawing an IP address, a private IP address from the subnet for intranet communication. When I say intranet, it is within the four walls of this particular network, meaning outside the network, you cannot talk to the machine over its private IP. It's only the public IP which basically comes into picture. So I'll say this is private IP, and I also went ahead and I'm creating something known as a public IP address out here. There is a public IP address that's getting created, which is again being attached to the same network interface card. So you have a public IP address, you have a number for this particular public IP address out there, and this particular public IP is also getting attached to your NIC card. So now your NIC card has both a private and a public IP address. So we have a private, we have a public IP address, both of them attached to the NIC card. And finally, the NIC card attaches itself to the virtual machine out here that you're creating. So this is how your architecture is going to look like. So again, if you go back, this is what it did. It created the public IP addresses, network security groups, virtual networks, network interfaces, virtual machines, and there's something known as a schedule, which means that my account, every virtual machine gets shut down after 7. So it's an auto shutdown schedule that basically got, let's say, created within this particular virtual machine. And you can now go into, let's say, the resource group, and you can look into these resources out here. And if I just group them by type, it's going to just show me, it's going to categorize this resources, and it's going to tell you the name of the network interface, the network security group rule, the public IP address. And if I click on the public IP address, you will get an actual IP address out here, which is 2096.37.1. If I just go back, then I have my demo VM, then I have the virtual network and a subnet inside this particular virtual network with 251 addresses minus one, because you have allocated one particular address to your NIC card, which is running at a private IP address of 10.1.0.4, And if you go inside the VM, this is what you're going to see. You have a public IP address. At the same time, if you just scroll down, you also have a private IP address out here. So you have both the public and the private. This is used for internet communication, meaning from an internet, you can use this particular IP and you can just go ahead and log into this machine, or you can use this machine as a web server or something like that. But this is a private IP communication, which means only within the network, only within the range of the network, only within the bounds of the network out here as such. So this is how a virtual machine gets created, and these are all the components. So any questions here, guys? Anyone? Any questions here?
Sir, good morning, sir. Madhu here, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. While creating virtual machines, yesterday I have observed one thing called
Mhm.
available zone something,
Correct.
but I have not seen your machine while creating in
Yes.
your case.
Yes. So when you are creating machine, you're talking about availability zone, isn't it?
Yes, yes, sir.
So when I just go and create a machine, those concepts will come here in availability options. Do you see this? Availability zone, availability sets, and virtual machine skill sets.
Yes, I have observed something zone one, zone two, zone three,
Zone 1, Zone 2, and
like that.
etc. Yes. If you click this, you have this called Zone 1, Zone 2,
Okay,
and
thank
Zone
you, sir.
3. Right. So we'll talk about this.
Okay,
Like this. This is. I mean, this needs a complete different lecture. This comes under a concept called high availability. So once we discuss about virtual machines, and once we know how to create a web server out of a virtual machine, the next topic is that we are going to go into availability zones and availability sets out there.
okay, thank you so much.
Yes. Any more questions, please? Yeah, any more questions? Anyone? Any questions? Anyone who's not following till here? I'll just take a quick pause. Anyone who's not following till here out here, any questions or any topics or any doubts around the components? The reason I'm stressing this out so much is because going further, all these components will really help you out to understand the subject more further. So please let me know if there is any questions still here.
Kiran,
Hmm. Good, please.
yeah, actually, yesterday you told me that RDP and HTTPs I have some particular value, like double three ten is
Correct.
there. So,
Correct.
it is mandatory for that is double three. Is there any other number also?
No. So
Why
universally,
it is having particular number? Is there any calculation is there or condition?
it's not a calculation, it's actually a norm. Basically, when the internet protocol addresses are assigned, and when basically the entire IT convention is going around, it's a norm that you go ahead and let's say put HTTP at 80 or HTTPS at 443 and RDP at double 389 out here. So no matter what, in whichever cloud that you work, whether it being Azure or whether it being AWS or GCP, all of them follow the same convention. So it's a convention that everyone is following. There isn't a specific reason for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, sir. I have a doubt. I have some doubts on IP addresses in subnet 251 is a default. It just depends upon the subnet address that you create. If it's a /24, then yes, it's let's say a 251 addresses that you're going to get. It's actually 256 minus 5 Azure reserved addresses out there as such. So yes, if it's a /24, then 251 is the default out there as such. Yes. So now what I'm going to do right now is let me copy the IP address of this machine. And if I want to log inside this machine, again, very importantly, please observe that before you do an RDP, please check whether it's a Windows machine or not. And second is please check whether the machine is running or not. The status of the machine. These are the two things that you need to check. So what I'll do is I'll just simply go and I'll copy the IP address out here, and I'll search for remote desktop. I'll just put the name, or I'll just put the ID of the machine. I'll just say more options. I'll give my username, and I'm now trying to log inside this machine, and now I have the username and it's asking me for the password. So I'll just go ahead and hit the password out here. This is the same password what I've given while I was creating the machine out there, and I'm saying yes, and I'm logging inside this machine right now. So I have now logged inside this machine. So let's wait for this one to, let's say, load out. And now the machine is booting up. Now it's a Windows server class machine, guys. It's not a home operating system. It's a Windows server. And what do I want to do with a Windows server? Why did I even create a Windows server out here? Is because I wanted this machine to act like a web server, which means that, let's imagine this. You have some random website, irctc.co.in. Now, irctc.co.in might have hosted the code somewhere, meaning all the code that the developers of irctc have written, they might have stored it somewhere. And that's where I'm assuming that they have stored it in a virtual machine. So now, if you are a user who's coming from the internet and who's visiting this particular website called irctc.co.in, very simply, from your laptop, it'll go to this particular website called irctc.co.in, and in the background, it'll get diverted into the public IP address or into the IP address of the virtual machine that is running in the background that is hosting your code. This virtual machine will process all the requests, send it back to your browser, and the browser in turn will send it back to you. This is a typical web server. But in my case, I don't have a domain name. I don't have something called irctc.co.in. So what I'm doing is I'm simply replacing this with the IP address. So I'm saying instead of, let's say, irctc.co.in, calling it as irctc.co.in, I'm calling it as 2096.37.1. I know it's a little difficult, but we'll fix that too. So I'm calling it as, let's say, this particular domain name. I'll go in, and as of now, what will happen is this. If I just copy this out, go into a browser, paste this out here, and allow this to load. So I can simply take this into a browser, put this in. I can actually give this IP to you all also. And let's go ahead and, let's say, start this out again. One question out here is that how many NIC cards will connect to one particular subnet? Depends upon the subnet address space. Yes, it depends upon the subnet IPs. That's correct, Shiva. Let's wait for this one, and let's see. This is what you get. It's saying the site cannot be reached. It doesn't look like, it is responding and all that stuff. So the problem is that you created a machine, right? But I want this machine to behave like a web server. I want this machine to act like a web server, for which I need to change some settings inside the machine. I need to configure a couple of things inside the machine, and that's what I do right now. So I'll just go into the machine, and let me remove this out. And by default, this is how your machine is going to look like. It's a Windows. It looks like Windows 10. It's not Windows 10. It's a Windows Server machine out here. So if I just go here and search for something called Server Manager. Now every server class operating system comes with something known as a Server Manager application out here. So I'll click on Server Manager, and in here it will allow you to add something called as roles and features for a particular machine out here. Meaning you have this machine. Now you can go ahead add roles to this machine. So I'll say add role, and it says before you begin, please read this out and etc. I'll say I'm good with that. I'll say next. I'll say installation type is a role based installation, wherein I'm adding a few roles to this machine to convert this machine into a web application server. I'll say next. It's saying what is a server. I'm saying this is a server which is demo VM. I'll again say next. Now it's asking me what kind of a role you want. A virtual machine can play a lot of roles. Like it has a lot of roles out here that you can play. For example, it can play something like a fax server, meaning if you want to configure this as a fax, meaning it can receive fax, send faxes, and all that stuff. It can also be acting like, let's say, Azure Active Directory server. Meaning you can have your own, Active Directory domain hosted on this particular server. You can have users configured and all these things. So this is something that you can do. But in my case, I want it to be as a web server. So it's now telling web server provides a reliable, manageable, and scalable web application infrastructure. I'll say yes, web server in the bracket IIS, Internet Information Services. So when you say web server, the tool in the background will install a piece of software called IIS, Internet Information Service Engine or Internet Information Service. And I'll just go ahead and I'll say add features and I'll say next. I'll say next and next and then go ahead and install this out. So I'm just going ahead doing a feature based installation out here and I'm installing a feature called IIS web server, and this will make sure to convert my machine into a web application server. What does that mean? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. It'll take a minute or two to go ahead and install this out. So again, I just came here, said add roles and features. I said add a role basically out there. I said the role is web server IIS, and I went ahead and I'm installing this particular role out here on my virtual machine out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here?
Suresh,
Good, please.
uh, assume that, I have a virtual machine that is RDP,
Okay.
and before I giving that IP to the users, I
Okay.
wanted to, give by default favorites in the by either in the Edge or a Chrome. Assume I have five favorites, five
Mhm.
websites which I wanted to. Will be covering that topic or later,
No, no,
or
I no,
this will be the same topic.
no, I didn't get you. Can you come again, please? Like, what is the question exactly?
See, I was saying like, usually if you open any website and we will
Mm-hmm.
bookmark that website, right, in a
Right.
Edge or a Chrome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have five websites. Okay.
Okay.
And before I giving this IP address to the users, I mean to remote desktop or a virtual machines giving to the users, I wanted to set up that five bookmarks in the RDP and give it to the users.
Okay.
So how do we give that? Do we have a possibility of giving that?
See again on an RDP session, yes, we can do that. I mean, we can normally do that, but again, that comes into pure management role out there. So if that's something that you are trying to do, I can go ahead and give the documentation for the same thing out there as such. But I'm not
Okay.
going to
Can
cover
you
that in
please?
this session. Mhm.
I mean, not in this session. Moving forward, shall we covering it, or
No,
we don't have a topic of this in the
no, we
program?
don't have a topic in the program at all.
Okay. So can you share that link? In the you can forward that link to the Kiran and he will place it in the group, or else I know sometimes it is very difficult for us to copy the links from here.
Mhm.
So if you
Sure. I mean,
can share that link to the Kiran will be posting that link into the group because you are not there in that group, right? The 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. group.
sure. Before that, what I want you to do is just go ahead, send me out the requirement over an email, okay? That what exactly is your requirement as such.
Okay, fine.
Just send me the
The the,
requirement on the
e-
email.
the email ID.
It is
Uh,
classes@devops@gmail.com. Same thing.
okay,
So
classes
please send
Azure
it
DevOps at
across.
Gmail. Okay,
Correct.
fine. Yeah.
Please send it across and let me know. Like, please, send across the what do you say, the exact requirement, and I'll just go ahead and let's say look at that.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so now the installation is done. I have the rules and features that we have installed on this particular machine. Let me go ahead into the front end, or let me go ahead into my browser. I have the same IP. This was the error that I was getting. I'll just refresh this out, and now I have, let's say, a simple page out here telling that the Internet Information Services is kind of running in the background. So now I have something called as an Internet Information Service that is running in the background. It's a simple file hosted inside my machine. So if I go inside my machine into the C drive of my machine, so if I go into the C drive of the machine out here, I have a folder called inetpub that's got created. Internet publishing folder or internet publish folder out here. Now this is not there earlier. This is not there when I created the server. This will get this will get created as and when you install the IIS. As and when you install the IIS, or let's say the Internet Information Services, that's when this folder will actually get created. So I'll just go inside the folder, and inside this folder I have a subfolder called www root, a root folder out here. So what does your IIS do, or what does your virtual machine do, is that whatever content you place inside this particular root folder, whatever it is, say something like HTML, CSS, Java, .NET, such a kind of a content, all these contents will be exposed to the user over the internet, which simply means that you can take your whole, you can take the entire code, place it inside this particular root folder, and done. You can simply go ahead and browse that particular IP address, or browse that particular, let's say, domain name from the internet, and this folder will just go ahead and respond back. That's what it is doing right now. I just went ahead, let's say, refresh the screen. I'm getting this particular content. If I go inside this particular folder, let me open this out in a second. I have a HTML document. So if I just open this with, let's say, Notepad, I have a HTML document that Microsoft has by default given. It is telling this is the document and etc. And along with this, the HTML document internally is referring to an image. It's telling, okay, fine, this is IIS image and all that stuff. And this is the image that I have, which is something like Internet Information Services. The same thing what you see in this page out here as such. Which means if I do some scribbling out here, right? If I say IIS, save this image out here, just go back, refresh the screen, I'll get the same thing again out here, which means whatever is there in that particular folder, whatever HTML or whatever code is there in that particular folder is exposed over the internet, and this is now accessible worldwide. Any user or anyone who just has an internet connection, has a browser, can simply go to this website, go and put this IP in, and that's it. We're done. You'll be able to see the content out here. Now, if I further want to, let's say, enhance this website, because this is a very simple, let's say, website that Microsoft has given me. If I further want to enhance this website, I can go and download my own code or write my own code, place it inside the folder. I'll also show you all that. We can go and write our own code, download our own code out here, download the own HTML sample templates, put it inside that particular folder, and simple. Your virtual machine, whenever this particular virtual machine gets a request over the internet, when I say over the internet, it's getting a request at a port number called port 80, HTTP. It simply goes ahead inside the machine and gets all this content, whatever is placed inside that particular folder, and exposes it out to you, let's say, over the internet out here as such. So the next going further, what I'll do is like I'll just go ahead, take my own sample content. I'll go ahead, download something, or I'll write something. I'll place it inside that folder, and let's see how it kind of works out there as such. So any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here? Any questions or confusion still here?
Sir, is it a one which is similar to Apache Tomcat that we use in PHP?
Yes, exactly. It's kind of the one which we use. Let's say it's like Apache Tomcat. Yes, that's correct. Apache Tomcat is also, let's say, a kind of web server, and this is also
So while
exactly the
connecting,
same. Exactly. Hmm. Go ahead, Ravi. You had a question. Sorry. Yes. Any more questions till here? Okay. So let's do one thing. With that, I'll again go back into my machine. I'll again go back into my virtual machine out here. Let me do one thing. Okay. And let me again go back into the server manager. Now I want to download a few HTML templates. In order to download that, see, it's a server operating system. Okay, it doesn't come with Google Chrome. It doesn't come with Microsoft Edge. It doesn't come with all of those things out there as such. What you can do is that you can use the Internet Explorer, but the internet access is very much restricted when you, let's say, follow a virtual machine out here. But let's say I want to download something. So what I can do is I can go into, let's say, this particular option called local server, and by default I get an Internet Explorer enhanced security configuration. So there's a good amount of security out here. So what I'll do is I'll just disable this for now. I'll say, okay, fine, please disable the internet, let's say, Explorer enhanced security configuration. Once it's off, I'll just go here and I will just put in thing that is download. Okay, I'll just, let's say, go ahead and search for download HTML templates. So I'll just go ahead, search for, please go ahead and help me download HTML templates and extra. And let's see if I have a page where I can go ahead and download this out. I have a website called freecss.com. That's what I'm really looking for. Yes. So this is a popular website called freecss.com, which will just go ahead and give you, let's say, the HTML templates out there. And let's see. So I have some random HTML template wherein it's going ahead and telling that, okay, fine, you have something like interiors and all that stuff, or you have something like jewelry, which is more connectable. So just it's a website that basically is designed for jewelry and etc. I'll just download this template. So let me go ahead, hit the download button, and I'll say save this out. And it shouldn't take a lot of time. Now it's saved. So I'll just go into the download folder. I'll do a right click. I'll say extract all. So I'm just extracting whatever is there in that inside that particular folder out there. And once I extract this out, let me go inside this folder. And I have all this content. I have CSS, I have fonts, I have all these content that developer has already developed. I just copy this out, go back into this particular C drive, go back into something called inetpub, go back into www root. I'll just delete the existing folders, or I'll just delete the existing files. So once you delete the existing files, right, this is the error that you see. So when your client is complaining that, you know what, this is the error that I've got, I have went ahead, I have configured everything, but this is the error that I'm getting, you will have to look at what is the content inside that particular www root folder. So if there's no content inside it, or if the content inside it is inaccessible, this is the kind of error that you actually get. So I'll just say, okay, fine, just go here. So there's no content. I copied all my HTML. I'll paste it out here. So I'll just copied everything. I've pasted it out here. Just come back. I'll just refresh this out. And let's wait on what will really happen out here. Now I have a fully working website. Sorry, I now have a fully working website with a couple of buttons like login and all that stuff. Of course, these won't really work. I do not, let's say, enhance the functionality of it like a database and all that stuff. I do not do that. But yes, most of it will work. It will tell you where it is placed out of and all these things out. And if I was a HTML developer, if I basically know how to develop HTML, I would have simply gone ahead, changed all these things, put all the images and all that stuff, and I would have made a fully working website out here. Like this is how I just went ahead and created a simple, let's say, IIS server on top of a Windows virtual machine and hosted my entire code on it. I hosted my entire code here, all the code in the form of HTML. I took all the code, place it inside this particular folder called www root, and once I pasted it inside this particular folder called www root, very simple as a user, when you are going ahead into that particular, let's say, or into the IP address of your virtual machine, it's simply going ahead and diverting your traffic, or simply going ahead and diverting your request into the actual virtual machine out here. And the virtual machine is looking, or it's going inside this particular folder called root. It's seeing what is the code, and it is simply giving you back the executable content. It's simply giving you back, let's say, the executable. It's telling, okay, fine, you know what, this is your website, go ahead, play around with that, and so on and so forth. So this is what you can do really with an IIS server out here. So any questions till here that I can take? Anyone, any questions I can take till here?
Uh, Hi Abhishek.
Good, please.
I have one question. So yesterday I tried to create a virtual machine.
Mm-hmm.
So you said there is one option called that automatically it will be logged off, right? Logged off it is some kind.
You mean
I'm
shutdown?
not getting that option. Yes, yes, shut down, but I'm not getting that options. Like that
Okay.
option is not getting created because of this is free trial I'm using.
Shouldn't be. Even in a free trial, I think it should allow you to go ahead and create. So let's see. So I'll just go ahead. I won't create something, but I'll just go ahead and say demo VM sample, something like this. Let's see. Let's say Windows Server 2019. Let's scroll down. Let's say this is some test user or something like this. So I'm just filling all the details so that I can go ahead and show that to you.
Mhm.
And let's come down and go into management out here. Just scroll down, and this is what you will see, something called as an auto shutdown schedule out here. So in your case, are you able to see this under management when you're creating a machine?
No, I missed this. I have not ticked it.
Okay, so if you tick it, then it will
Mhm.
ask you which time you want to shut down the machine. For example, let's say you have multiple time zones here. You can go and pick up the Indian Standard Time. So let's see if I think yeah, Indian Standard Time. You can say at what time of IST you want this machine to be shut down, and once you tick it out, it'll just go ahead and say, okay, fine, the machine will get shut down in, let's say, this particular 7 p.m. every day out here as such.
Okay, so it's only getting shut down. Again, can we restart it?
Can you restart it? You can, but again, that's a manual process until and unless you do not automate it out.
Okay,
So it's
so
only a
we should
shutdown.
not take
Yes.
this, right? So we should not take this.
Again, it depends upon completely what you want to really do. Let's say if you are using this, I mean, if you have a lot of developers who are working on this machine only till
Mm.
6 p.m. and after that you want it to automatically shut down so that you can save on some cost, you can take this out. And the
Okay,
next
so
day
it
you
is
can go ahead and
basically
start
for
it.
the cost saving. Yeah, that's what I
Exactly.
was asking. So next
Mhm.
day I can restart it.
Next day you can start it. Yes. When you shut it down, right? Next day you can start. Next day you can start it.
Okay. One more questions.
Mhm.
I think this is not the right time, but you know what happened when I was creating a free trial?
Okay.
I used my two of my credit card,
Okay.
different ICC bank,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it does not got created. Later on, at the end of the day, I was getting a message that like a standing instructions on my credit card has been activated for 2 lakhs on each card.
Okay. See,
So,
standing instructions again.
mhm,
Yeah, this is a very common thing what Microsoft is doing right now to activate the standing instruction. To
mhm,
go ahead and, let's say, allow itself to deduct around or about 2 lakh rupees if you have such a kind of a billing and if you're not paying it out. So
mhm.
what you can do is that you can go to your banking website, and or you can talk to the customer support of your bank and remove the standing instructions out. So you have a page for standing instructions, you can remove it out, not a problem. Even if you leave it, it shouldn't be a problem at all.
No, actually, I was a previous employee in ICICI Bank only.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
there is no, like we cannot remove standing instructions. So the other way is that we have to change the card. So the
See,
card
you
number
can
we
remove
need
a
to
standing
change.
instructions. We did the standing instruction removal. Like one of the students was facing the same issue, so we did a
Mhm.
standing instruction removal. So I think just check once and let me know if you are able to do that.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
No problem. Any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? Okay, so what I want you all to do today is this: create a virtual machine. A very simple virtual machine out here. Convert the machine into a web server. Convert, let's say, the same machine into a web server out here. And what I did, I went into the machine. Inside the machine, I manually went inside and something called I opened something known as server manager. I opened something known as server manager. I said add roles and features. I said installation type and all that stuff. Try doing it for the very first time. For the second time, what I want you to do is that I want you all to tell me, is it possible to do all these things? Meaning, is it possible to go ahead, add the IIS role? So how did we do IIS role today? Manually, we went into server manager, we said roles and features, add something, and we added something called web server IIS. My question for you all is that can you all see if this is possible using a PowerShell script? Is it possible to achieve the same using a PowerShell script? Is what I want you all to, let's say, look at. And in tomorrow's session, I'll also tell you how to go ahead and do it with PowerShell. But I want you all to respond back firstly, telling how should you do it, or how do you go ahead install the roles and features using a PowerShell script out here as such. Yes, any more questions before I close?
Sir, can we change the IP address in the domain name in the server manager itself?
Can you change the IP address in the server manager? No, IP address is controlled
No, can we
in
change the
here
IP
at your
address
infrastructure.
into a domain? No, into domain names.
Into a domain name, you can do it right here. You can add it right here. You
Where,
should add it right here.
where
This is your
in
public IP
portal itself,
address.
Azure portal.
Yes, in your portal itself. This is the public IP address. And do you see this called DNS name, domain name services?
Yes.
You should add it here.
So we have. Okay. Thank you, sir.
So we'll look at that. We'll see what domain name services are, and we have a complete session for DNS. We'll look at when we let's say we'll go there and we'll look at what DNS is and all these things out there. Yes, any more
Sir, I have
questions?
one more thing, sir.
Good, please. Good, please.
Sir, in which cases we are going to shut down our machine? Means, for example, if we take IRCTC is there. So if we shut down the machine, so we can't expose this publicly, right? Sir, user
Exactly.
cannot
If you
access.
shut down your machine, end user cannot access. You'll simply get an error message telling that what the machine is, or the website is not reachable or something like that. See, for a website that needs a 24 by 7 up and running, let's say, requirement, we never shut a machine down. So we never really
Mhm.
go ahead and shut the, let's say, virtual machine down. But in cases, see again, a virtual machine, right, is not only used as a web server, it has a versatile role. It can be used, let's say, for by your developers to go ahead and, let's say, sometimes what happens is that really, in a real-time environment when you're working, right, there is a lot of
Sorry,
restriction that are, yeah.
sir, your voice is lost, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. So in a real-time environment, what I was telling is that in a real-time environment, when you're really working with a development team and etc., right? See, your organization might not give the developer or the DevOps engineer or the all the privileges to go ahead and, let's say, install, let's say, softwares on your local machine. They might not give it. They rather might give you a virtual machine, and they might install all the software that is required inside a virtual machine, and the developers are expected to, let's say, go and write their code, or the DevOps engineers are expected to write the PowerShell scripts inside the machine, save it inside the machine because of security reasons. Now, in such
Mhm.
cases, let's say if the organization tells you that, okay, fine, the employee is working from 10 to 7, After that, he has no work. He doesn't really, like a popular trend is that the organization observes that after 7 they have a very good opportunity to go ahead and shut down the machines to save some cost. In that case, then yes, you can go ahead and shut the machine down. But in the cases where your website is, or your website needs a 24 by 7 up and running time, we don't really shut the machine down as such.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Yes. No problem. Any more questions, guys? All right, so that's it from my end. Teja, please go ahead and send across an email to me. In that particular email ID, I'll address the same thing. If you have a specific question, I'll address it out. I'll take it here in the email. And if I'm not able to, let's say, resolve it over the email, I'll go ahead and have a connect with you over a separate call out here as such.
Uh, Thank you so much, Suresh. But I'm, poor at writing email. I cannot express what I wanted to say in the email, so it would
Sir,
be a very
the
bad English.
reason the
I
reason I'm
understand.
forcing people to write an email is because you cannot say the same thing in the organization, right?
That's
So,
true. That's true. I'm
so
not denying.
So please
I,
write it out. And if I feel that you need corrections on the email, I'll also go ahead and suggest the same thing. So
sure,
please don't
definitely.
shy out in doing that. Please
Nah,
come out
nah,
of
nah,
your comfort
nothing.
zone and go ahead and do that. Okay.
Sure, definitely, definitely. So tomorrow, do we have a class, Suresh,
Yes,
or no?
we will have a
Because we
class
don't
tomorrow.
have any of this. Okay,
Yeah,
fine,
we
got
will
it.
have a class
Hi
tomorrow.
Suresh,
Yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Suresh, for example, in real-time environment, when we are working on some project, for example, like
Mm-hmm,
if we wanted to create the virtual machine, like as a
mm-hmm.
client specific,
Okay.
client testing machine. So all
Mm-hmm,
a client's core application should be installed.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in that way, how we have to manage it, or it will be already like given by the.
Not really. Again, see, right now I'm just creating a simple machine. I just went and started to create a very simple machine out here. But in a real-time environment, what really happens is that yes, you have a machine and you'll have a couple of softwares that you want to install on top of those machines. So what you can do is that you can create an ARM template for the machine. We'll also go into, let's say, automation for this. We'll also understand how do you create a machine in an ARM template. And in an ARM template, right, there is a concept called custom script extension. What it allows you to do is that it will allow you to run PowerShell scripts while creating a virtual machine out here. So using this particular concept called custom script extension, we go ahead write down a couple of scripts to install things like multiple softwares out there. We place it inside your template, and when the template gets deployed, right? When it creates a machine, like as and when it creates a machine, it'll also go ahead and install all these softwares out there and keep the machine ready for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any more
Yeah, I
questions?
have one more.
Hmm? Good,
I have
please.
one more question to you.
Good, please.
Actually, as you told, like subnet, like range, we are
Mm-hmm.
taking 10.0.0.24.
Mm-hmm.
So till 29 we can take, as you told.
Correct. Correct.
But we are not using by default whenever we are creating only taking 24.
For ease of convention, again, you can go ahead take 29 also, but 29 becomes a very small subnet. You'll only get 3 addresses out there out of that particular subnet out there. But yes, you can go ahead create anything, let's say greater than or equal to 16, because my virtual network address space is itself 16. So anything greater than or equal to 16, which is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 to 29, you can create it. But for the ease of convention, for ease of dividing the subnet, I'm making sure that each and every subnet gets 251 IPs out there. So it's just because of the ease, but depending upon the requirement, you can go ahead reduce the space or increase the space of your subnet out there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so that's it from mine, guys, and we'll schedule the class tomorrow. I'll just go ahead and inform the institute, and we will schedule something by today in the evening. Thank you, guys, and have a good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Take care.